Why were these mummies entombed with gold tongues in their mouths? And what Iron Age treasures are hidden inside the block? What's up, dirt nerds? I'm Giselle Király, and we are back with some more incredible stories from the world of archaeology. You might have heard some of these, but as an archaeologist, I want to dig a little deeper into these monumental finds. In this video, we're going to look at gold-tongued mummies. I'll chat to host of the Ancients podcast, Tristan Hughes, about a massive Iron Age hoard, and I'll tell you all about a cache of coins that transformed what we know about Viking-era Norway. You'll have heard the saying, being born with a silver spoon in your mouth, right? But what about being buried with a gold tongue in your mouth? Perhaps not, but that's exactly what happened to some people who died in Egypt about 2,000 years ago. Archaeologists were working on a Roman-era tomb in Egypt when something in the mouth of a mummy caught their eye. It was a gold tongue. In fact, 3 mummies were found to have gold tongues, with a 4th having a copper one. I wonder what they did to warrant the downgrade. So, let's take a closer look at these special ornate organs and find out why people were mummified with precious metal in their mouths. These mummies were uncovered at a site called Oxyrhynchus, also known today as Albanasa, by a team from the Institute of Ancient Near East Studies at the University of Barcelona. Rewind the clock about 2,000 years and Oxyrhynchus was a bustling city in Egypt at a time when the country fell under Roman rule. Today, it's a thriving archaeological site, famous for so many things, from a colorful children's sock to the discovery of tens of thousands of ancient documents known as the Oxyrhynchus papyri. Well, that site is a treasure trove of surprising archaeological discoveries. As well as loads of reading material, Oxyrhynchus is also where the team recently found actual treasure, 3 mummies with gold tongues, and the mummy who had to settle for copper. The team, led by Dr. Maite Mascor and Dr. Esther Ponce Milado, found the mummies in a tomb dating to the Roman period. As well as these eye-catching tongues, there was evidence of gold leaf on other parts of the mummies, and for some, the actual mummy wrappings were ornate, some, incredibly, with geometric patterns. I should probably clarify what I mean by a gold tongue. These weren't actual tongues that were dipped or encased in gold after death like I first imagined when I heard this news. Instead, these foil organs were created by hand as thin, tongue-shaped sheets of gold, then placed into the mouths of the deceased during the long mummification process. Mummification took a long time. Quick, how long do you think it could take? Well, it could take up to 70 days, just for one body, and it was performed by specific priests. These priests weren't just spiritual, they were scientific. Not only did they need to know the necessary rituals and prayers, but they also needed detailed knowledge of human anatomy, presumably a strong stomach, and who knows, maybe they had to handcraft gold tongues too. I'd be keen to learn more about who was making these tongues, actually. While this is obviously a fascinating discovery, it actually isn't the first time mummies have been found with golden tongues. In fact, Oxyrhynchus is somewhat renowned for it. In late 2024, for example, excavations on the site uncovered a whopping 52 mummies from the Roman era, 13 of which were sporting gold tongues. One of them even had 2 golden tongues. Now that's truly showing off. Another had gold plating decorating their fingernails. Before that, in December 2021, archaeologists working at Oxyrhynchus reportedly uncovered 2 tombs containing mummified remains. Among the artifacts were, yes, you guessed it, gold foil tongues, 3 of them to be exact. One was found in the mouth of a male, another in a female, and there was one that was really small, believed to have been in the mouth of a child's remains. Unlike the other tombs, these 3 date to the Saite dynasty in Egypt, around the 7th to 6th centuries BCE. This means that these tombs predate the many Roman ones by several hundred years, so this practice has been going on for a while. So, Oxyrhynchus is clearly a hotspot for mummies getting this special gold foil tongue, but it isn't the only place to have gold tongue discoveries. Some similar discoveries have been made elsewhere in Egypt, suggesting this is more of a general burial style rather than a style only done in a single location. In 2022, gold tongues were found in the mouths of mummies about 30 miles north of Cairo in the Quesna necropolis in the western Nile Delta. And it wasn't just the tongues. Gold sheets were also found on some of the skeletons. Plus, gold ornaments of lotus flowers and scarab beetles were discovered among the human remains. Egypt is a land rich in gold, but this much? I've been surprised learning about how much gold there was and how commonly it was used in burials. There are even more gold tongues that have been discovered across Egypt. It turns out it was quite a widespread practice. These tongues include the mummy unearthed during excavations at Taposiris Magna, about 30 miles west of Alexandria in 2021. Honestly, it's hard to keep up at this point. If there are any that I've missed that you think are worth mentioning, let me know in the comments. Or if you happen to know more about that copper tongue, I'm still thinking about it. However, the question remains, why were these mummies buried with golden tongues? Well, as with a lot of things done during mummification, it's about making the afterlife easier. First, it's useful to know that in ancient Egypt, it was believed that once you died, you visited the court of Osiris, the god of the underworld. Here, you had to essentially plead your case and hopefully be admitted. Osiris was the god of the afterlife, and fertility, strangely, and one of his key jobs was to judge the newly deceased. What a role! And I thought sitting on the exit row of the plane was a big responsibility. If you know what you're looking for, you'll easily be able to spot Osiris in Egyptian art. He's the one often depicted with green skin, partially mummified and wearing the Atef crown. It's a strong look. His origin story is that he was an Egyptian king who was resurrected after being murdered and then made a god of the underworld. As you do. The point is, adding these tongues was believed to help the deceased person speak to the god Osiris. It was a way of giving the deceased a helping hand in navigating the afterlife. You might be wondering, why gold? Couldn't they have made the tongues from linen or papyrus? But it makes sense that they would choose this precious metal. And it's not just because it's shiny. Egyptians believed that the skin of their gods was made from gold. It's one of the reasons that we find so much gold in the tombs of pharaohs. They wanted to ensure the body had maximum divine protection and let the gods know that this was someone extra important. It's the same reason archaeologists have found mummies with gold elsewhere on their bodies, such as their fingers. It's a godly material. So, the gold tongues make sense, right? What better way to argue your case to the gods than with a divine tongue? It's like speaking their language. Perhaps, in their eyes, by being gold-tongued, the deceased person could now give a truly silver-tongued speech. As for the copper tongue, there aren't answers to that just yet. What do you make of the discovery? And if you got to pick, what material would you want your special tongue to be made of? Do you think there are more gold-tongued mummies? And maybe not in Egypt? I can't wait for more mummy discoveries. Going from Egyptian tombs to the north of England, the UK's biggest Iron Age metalwork hoard, the Melsonby Hoard, has just gone on display in the Yorkshire Museum. The folks at the museum were kind enough to invite me along to see it before open to the public, which you can see over on my Instagram. Someone else who made a great video about the Melsonby Hoard is Tristan Hughes, my friend and host of the Ancients podcast. Tristan and I got together earlier to discuss the hoard and to get real nerdy about the ancient history behind this unbelievable find. So the Melsonby Hoard, we've both seen it.
Love it.
Very
Amazing.
cool thing. It's basically two hoards in one, isn't it? It's called the Melsonby Hoard, but it's actually two sections.
Yeah, two deposits, but and we can get into like how they differ. But I mean, we can move them together. We can put them together and just say the Melsonby Hoard. But yes, there were two particular deposits that were discovered. One, this kind of amazing block, which I think is one of the most amazing discoveries in Britain, quite frankly. It's so unique. Almost 100 artifacts within it. And then the other, over 900 artifacts, one of the largest hoards of Iron Age metalwork ever found in Britain.
So you mentioned the Iron Age. This is an Iron Age hoard. That's 2,000 years ago. What was the Iron Age like? We're talking about the north of England as well, right? We're talking about this area that's, in my head, it's kind of empty in a way. It's a lot of land and then people living off of the land. How do you picture it?
Well, people living off the land is right because everyone's a farmer back then. You think also, of course, of warriors at that time as well, and they would have been fighting from time to time against each other. And don't think of just one kingdom. Right? So we have all of these different tribal names from the Roman sources, from Caesar and so on. And in the north of what is today England, one of the big confederations you have are known as the Brigantes. And yes, you should imagine most people living in kind of farmsteads, a few of the classic kind of traditional roundhouse settlements. But then you also have these larger settlements in the landscape, like in the vicinity of where this hoard was discovered, these kind of great ceremonial centres, this one called Stannic. So yes, you should be imagining the population spread out along the land, well, throughout the landscape, living off the land, farming, crops and animals, but also once in a while, it seems like convening at these bigger centres for particular events.
let's get into that because that's really what the Melsonby Hoard is, isn't it? We've got this block that you mentioned before, and then we have these other deposits that are kind of, in a way, surrounding this block. We don't really know what the block is. It's not exactly surrounding it. But let's just focus on the block.
Right.
What is this block?
So the block it's a block. And it's this amount, or so almost 90 objects, precious metal objects, largely copper, bronze, but also some iron spears in there too, that have been laid carefully in the ground more than 2,000 years ago. And we know they were laid carefully because there's a bit of fabric that survives, so it feels like they've all been bundled together. And over time, the copper or the metal it's it's fused with the soil. Hence why it's very, very difficult to detach the soil from those metal artifacts. And so there was a big conundrum when it was discovered, how much soil they could get off. When we put a social reel about this a year or so ago, some of the comments were hilarious, talking about, just give me a high-powered hose or something like that, I'll do that. But the potential damage behind that is why that doesn't happen. So actually they've decided to kind of keep it as this block, and I love that because it's so unique an artifact. And in many ways, because of that, it's one of the great treasures of the nation, I would argue now, because it's so different.
So this block, we've both seen it. It's on display now at the Yorkshire Museum, and it's sort of half finished. To get through a fossil, through rock, you have to blast it with air. And these conservators are doing something similar with the block.
They're using paleontological tools, aren't they?
They are, to slowly get through this massive block of metal and soil and a little bit of textile to try and see what's inside of it. But what we've got right now is this half excavated state. And so you're never going to see it like this again, almost.
Absolutely. And I think what I really loved about it is the fact that when you look at it, it's one of those artifacts, it rewards you the more you look at it, because you start seeing particular artifacts within. For instance, one of my favorite parts is you can see a head of a boar.
Oh, that's my favorite one too.
Boar,
yeah.
So the boar tusk, which of course you also associate with Iron Age Britain and also Gaul across the Channel as well, kind of the key symbol animals alongside the horse. I think there's also a face as well, and then you can see closely, you can see colour, not just the greenish copper alloy and the bronze colour or the iron spearheads. You can also see little bits of glass, of decorations. And it's one of those artefacts, when you go in, if you're able to go and see it at the Yorkshire Museum, the longer you look at it, the more artefacts you start to see peeking out from the soil. I just love it in that state as it is, as I've already made clear, just because it's so different, just because it's so eye-catching as it is.
You don't see any other blocks. You don't see anything like this, really, this conglomerate of metal anywhere. But you mentioned the colours, and you mentioned that there's so many different styles of things in there. And there is some coral. There's this coral that's from the Mediterranean, and you can find this within the Melsonby Hoard. What's the deal with that?
Yeah, for context, so of course the block is one deposit, and the other deposit, over 900 artefacts. A lot of those artefacts, we saw a handful, an array of them up at Durham University in the lab before they went to Yorkshire Museum. Lots of these artefacts are beautifully decorated, and they're to do either with horses or chariots, or the vehicles that these horses, or we should really be saying ponies, because they're very small horses back then, but very blinged up ponies, because you've got the harnesses, you've got the things for the mouths of the horses, you've got the terrets as well, the rings through which the reins are put, and all of these objects to do either be put on the horse themselves or to be attached to the chariots or the vehicles. They are made of bronze, they would or copper, and they would be shining, kind of beautiful, kind of goldish colour, so they would really reflect in the sunlight. And then that added bit, as you've mentioned, is this adding of colour, of this decoration, including coral from the Mediterranean. And if you look at the coral today on some of these harnesses that survive, it looks quite whitish. But back then it would have been pinkish, very strong pink reddish colour. Mm-hmm. So just imagine, because so many of the artefacts in the Hoard are like that. So imagine lots of ponies being blinged up with this bronze, the bronze harnesses, with this reddish decoration on these harnesses as well. And then this figure or figures they're pulling in a wagon or a chariot coming behind. this is meant to impress. This is meant to be a display of the power, and also a display of that person's ability in what is, the north of England, to get access to these materials, these precious colours and materials, from a place that most people who would see that chariot would never have gone to, would only have heard about it in legend, that there was this great sea. There were these people, hundreds of kilometres to the south, across the sea, and across the great mountain ranges and so on. Right? It's a statement, and we know that at Colchester, there must have been traders coming from the Roman world and bringing with them items that these elites in the south were very much wanting, whether that be feasting equipment, amphora, wine, precious objects from the Mediterranean world. And I think we've got something similar probably happening in Stannock, where you have the elites in what is today northern England. If you've got traders coming to places like Camalodunum, then they would have heard that there was a similar centre. There were equally powerful, equally wealthy people further north. So it makes sense that either those traders or other traders would then go on further north, would go to a similar centre like Stannock, when all these people are gathered for a particular ceremony, especially these elites with their chariots, and then, sell them, trade them, these goods that have been brought from the Mediterranean. And, it's amazing to speculate.
It is. And I love painting this picture of this time period, because they didn't write anything down, did they? So we have to speculate, actually, to be able to understand the Iron Age. And you mentioned feasting bowls, and that's something that they have there in the Melsonby Hoard, not in that block, but outside of it. There is a feasting bowl, but it's been deliberately destroyed. Do you want to mention a bit more about that? Because it's such a unique thing to have evidence of.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, first of all, interesting that in the Melsonby Hoard, there's not really, if any, personal adornments. There's no kind of jewellery or anything like that.
Yeah, not really, yeah.
But at the same time, these are very, as I've used the word blingy too much now, these are very show-offy, a display of someone's, what they can get hold of. This is the best of the best, made of precious metal, and then particular artifacts meant to, with rich decorations. And this copper alloy bowl made of thin sheets of copper also looks very green nowadays. Once again, it's got to think of actually being very shiny, very attractive, very appealing, back to 2,000 years ago, and with iron rims either side, and the center of it goes upwards. It's been going upwards, and the belief is, because they also found boulders in that deposit, is that what happened was the people deposited all of these items in the hole, including this bowl, this cauldron, put it down on the ground, and threw a boulder on top of it, and the copper alloy thin sheets shatters, and that. I know the Auction Museum put forward different theories. They like putting forward different theories as to what this hall could have been, and that's great, because that gets audience engagement, that makes you part of it, which is brilliant. My gut feeling is that this is part of some sort of, I'm going to use the R word, the ritual word,
I'm okay with that word.
The deliberate smashing up of functional objects, so that you're deliberately putting them out of use as you put them in the ground. I think that seems to be part of this ceremony when they're depositing this hoard in the ground.
Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, it's feast, festival, funeral. What's
yes,
the last
quite
one?
a few F's.
I can't remember.
Yes.
But
Fighting, maybe.
Fighting, yeah, that could be it. So there's these different ideas of what it could be, about why there's this massive deposit close to Stannock, so close to an important location, and really ritzy things being put in the ground, really blingy things being put in the ground. I think, why not be ritual?
Well, and also if you cross-reference it with other places in Iron Age Britain, this importance of either placing stuff in the ground or placing rich artifacts in rivers and so on. So these offerings, the fact that they haven't found a burial, to my knowledge,
not yet,
with the Melsonby Hoard, with the two deposits, of course the burial could be somewhere else. But I think it is probably to do with some sort of festival. And that kind of aligns, as mentioned earlier, with this idea of Stannock being where people from across the region, if it is this confederation of peoples, will gather for particular events. I always likening it to something like Glastonbury because you get a sense of the mud, the chaos.
Yes.
Lots of people in one place. Okay, they're not. Well, there still could be music.
There could have been music. There could have been music.
But a very smelly place at the same time. You know, you've all got to. It's
But pyres. They loved fire as well.
Fires,
I mean, we've got proof of that.
Smithing places as well, metalworking. You know, where traders would come as well. That's why, you know, probably they're getting all these artifacts from the Mediterranean. These objects probably at places standing, and for the richest in those parts of the world, in that part of the world, this is the time where you can show off your wealth. You can walk through in either a chariot or these amazing wagons, which we've got evidence of as well. You can show off your bling. And then what's even better, you can show how much you've got of it by then deciding to throw ample amounts of it into the ground. You know, that you can make these offerings because you have that, you know, that power and wealth and authority to do it. I know I say statement of power again and again, but I do think that's a central part of this.
Thanks, Tristan, for joining me. If you guys want to watch my extended chat with Tristan, you can do so by becoming a member of our channel. Also, you can watch his video on the Melsonby Hoard over on the History Hit YouTube channel. But for all of you hoard lovers out there, I've got even more good news. We're going to jump to a Scandinavian field to look at this incredible discovery in Norway. And it's beginning to look like one of the most exceptional archaeological finds ever from the late Viking Age. In April this year, Norwegian metal detectorists Veigar Surli and Rune Sætre found the first 19 coins of a stash in a ploughed field at Morstad farm near Rena. Sensibly, they stopped and contacted the local authority. Within days, the coin count had passed 100, then 1,000. And in the time since then, to the point we're recording this, it has risen to around 5,000 coins. That's an astonishing number. It's the largest hoard of Viking coins ever found in Norway. Thanks to the faces on the coins, they've been dated from the 980s to the 1040s, with rulers such as Ethelred II, Canute the Great, Otto III, and Harald Hardrada. But the Viking-era people didn't use a centralized currency in the way we do today. They operated on a bullion economy. Silver was valued by its weight and purity, rather than the style of coin. A hoard like this was essentially a frozen bank account, buried in a moment of extreme stress, perhaps an impending raid, a local feud, or a sudden departure for a voyage from which the owner never returned. Historians reckon a single silver coin back then had the buying power of about $20 or $25 today. It wasn't just a piggy bank for loose change, it was probably the owner's entire wealth. And if you're a Viking Age Norwegian and have $120,000 saved up in coins and need to keep them safe from raids, what do you do with them? You bury them in the ground, of course. But it's not just the size of this coin hoard that makes it exceptional. To put this particular coin hoard into perspective, one has to look back nearly 2 centuries. The reigning titan of Norwegian Viking Age silver is the Årstad hoard from Egersund, a massive collection of 1,849 coins recovered between 1836 and 1843. Since the mid-20th century, however, these mega hoards have become almost legendary in their rarity. In fact, no comparable discovery had been made since 1950, when 964 coins were pulled from the earth at Dronningens Gate in Trondheim. Norwegian Viking Age coin hoards have always lagged behind their Swedish, Danish, and Gotlandic counterparts in scale. Gotland, if you're wondering, is Sweden's largest island and home to the incredible Viking-era town of Visby. Let me know if we should do a video on it, because it's a pretty cool place. But anyway, the Morstad hoard doesn't just break the Norwegian ceiling, it more than doubles it. According to the local county archaeologist, these coins have been so well preserved that they look newly minted. But what were all these coins doing here in Norway? Jostein Beirakstol of the University of Oslo's Museum of Cultural History has made a link between this hoard and industrial-scale bog iron production in Österdalen between the 900s and the late 1200s. Refined iron would have been exported to mainland Europe. This shows us that this hoard is not the winnings of a Viking raid or seaborne trade, but the profit of a local industry. Most of the silver found in the hoard is foreign, which was standard for Norway at the time. But there were some Norwegian coins that must have been minted very shortly before they were stashed. And it's quite possible that this was linked to the return of Harald Hardrada, the infamous Norwegian king you might recognize as the guy who famously stormed England in 1066, right before the Battle of Hastings. But before that fateful defeat, he was a legendary leader, often known as the last real Viking. Around 1045, Fresh from a brutal career as a mercenary in Byzantium, he returned home, took part leadership of Norway, and launched their first national minting system. It was a savvy power move. He wanted to replace foreign silver with his own royal coinage to stabilize the economy and move away from the bullion currency. This hoard is essentially a frozen snapshot of that massive economic shift right as it was starting to take hold. This silver stash is a massive deal because it does more than just track the shift towards Harald Hardrada's personal mint. It actually proves there were way more coins circulating in Norway than we ever gave the era credit for. We're talking about a find that is larger than Norway's 4 previous big coin hoards from the Viking era put together. It really modernizes how we look at 11th century Norway. It shows us that Hardrada's regime was way more business savvy and plugged into international trade than the history books ever gave it credit for. And that brings us to the end of this week's roundup. Let us know which find you thought was the best, and maybe we'll make a bigger video about it. In the meantime, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. All the usual stuff. And thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.